Firstly, before we start, I just want to make a dedication. There was a gentleman, Rabbi in London, who passed away over 30 years ago. I spoke about him this morning a little bit as well in my share. Someone called Isaac Bernstein, Yitzchak Bernstein. I think you probably remember him. If you knew him, you would never forget him. Before he was rabbi in London, he actually spent 3 years in the Jewish Center in New York. After Rabbi Lamb left, he took over from Rabbi Lamb. And he was really a very, very unique individual. His shiurim are still online. If you log into the OU, it was unbelievable. If you log into the OU Parsha share, you'll listen to these shiurim and you think he's talking live, and he's been gone for more than 30 years, 31, 32 years. His son is around, Emmanuel Bernstein, and he's quite well known. He's written some very interesting Sfarim. And his Yortzeit was yesterday, 2 days ago, the 22nd of Elul. So I want to dedicate the learning to his memory, because really was a very special man. As I mentioned Norman Lamb, I just also want to mention, before we get going, that there's a new archive that's just come online of all the letters and articles. Norman Lamb was very, very prolific, the Chancellor of Yeshiva University, Rosh Yeshiva. And I searched this morning in the listing, and my name came up. And I thought, wait a minute, that's very strange. And it turns out that I was reminded of a letter that I wrote to him in 1972. And I haven't seen the letter for 53 years. And it's there, it's in the archive. Go figure that. It's Svitsinensky. Machon knows who that is. He was working. She is a granddaughter, his wife, of Lamb. So it's a family business over there. But saying that, good evening. Hi, Erev Tov. It's certainly worth checking out. And I had the very interesting correspondence. I was in a Haredi yeshiva, and Norman Lamb was involved with Yeshiva University. And we kind of agreed to disagree, and I was bouncing it off the mashgiach in the yeshiva, what he was saying. Very interesting. It was brought back a lot of happy memories of that correspondence. So Ayin Shom is certainly to be recommended. If you've got a few minutes to spare, good evening. Hi there. Oh, we're going to have to. Oh, we got a couple of chairs at the back. All right. For this evening. Before we start chapter 10, which is where we're up to, I just want to point out to you, next week, Rosh Hashanah, the first day Rosh Hashanah, the Haftarah, is chapter 1 plus a little bit of chapter 2 of Shmuel. The famous story of Elkanah going to the Mishkan and the two wives, Chana and Penina, and then Haftarah ends with what is called Tfilas Chana, the prayer of Chana. So most people say, why is that read on Rosh Hashanah? So the answer is because it's with Tefillah. But as we pointed out when we studied it, Chana it's not really a Tefillah. It's a little bit of prayer there, but much more her comments on the situation, praising God, but having a very big dig at Penina. There wasn't a happy relationship between the two wives. What I personally feel is that Haftarah is just so magnificent because Elkanah, I think, is the star of the show. If you remember, we said that he gathered all the troops. He used to go from around the country every year, gathering more and more people to go back to the Mishkan. The Mishkan fell into almost disuse, and people weren't going, right? It's almost if you take it for granted, a bit like today. I feel sometimes Jerusalem is so much part of our lives. We sort of take it for granted, and we need to sometimes make that extra effort to just be there every so often. They just open up the walkway from Ir David right up to the Kotel. That's something that everybody should go to. It's really special. So again, what the Haftarah, I think when you look at it next week on first day Rosh Hashanah, be inspired by Elkanah. Elkanah is an incredible man. And, as they say, the power of one Jew literally changed the world. And of course, we're in a situation today where, thank God, there are many Jews who have changed the world and are continuing to change the world in a good way. And again, I find that's very inspiring a message for Rosh Hashanah, that we should be pushed forward into doing our bit, making sure that we are contributing to a better world. And of course, at this point in time, it's really important, as it is at all times. So again, I just wanted to mention that, and of course there are other things there in the Haftarah, but that, to me, Elkanah is probably as important a character in the in the first day Haftarah of Rosh Hashanah as Chana is at the end of the particular story there. For today, we're going to look at chapter 10. In chapter 10, again, I think is a bit of a Rosh Hashanah theme, because what do we do in Rosh Hashanah? We crown the king. Everything about Rosh Hashanah is to do with Hamelech, right? The first word that the Chazan sings when he takes over from at the beginning of the davening is the word Hamelech, and the Melech is all the way through. And in fact, there's no Hashamnus, there's no Al Chetz on Rosh Hashanah. It's not about us. We are talking about God. The whole tefillah is God-centric. It's very much about Hashem, and it's about God's place in the world and the fact that we have to recognize it. And it's coronation time. Okay, so those of us who come from countries where they do coronations, we can sort of relate to that. Some places where, on principle, they won't do a coronation, it's a bit more difficult. Although I did find there was a great fascination in America for the royalty in England, but maybe for the wrong reasons, I don't know. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the story of Shaul finally being coronated, finally being crowned. But in the process, there is something that happens to him which is truly remarkable. And it's a clue to everything that's going to happen in the future. We all know the story. Shaul becomes very depressed. He becomes very morose. He becomes melancholic. According to Malbim, he uses the word melancholia. That's the word he uses to describe Shaul. And the question is why? Why did Shaul go so downhill after the failure with the story with Amalek? What happened to Shaul? And the clue is in chapter 10 that we're going to be learning this week. So that's the focus of this particular presentation, to look and find out what made Shaul so amazing, put him on such a high that when he fails, he comes down with a thud, with literally crashes down. And as they say in America, he flipped out completely. The guy was really very, very, it's very sad. It's very, very sad what happened to him. And we'll come to that in due course. So that's the focus. But look at these psukim. It's a fantastic chapter. Chapter 10. Vayikach Shmuel et pach Hashem. He took the flagon, I don't know how to call it, the vial of oil, V-I-A-L. It wasn't a horn of oil. When they anointed the kings, the real kings, David and beyond, it was done with this, like a, you sort of take a shofar and you sort of cover it in half and you pour the oil in there. With the temporary kings, it was Pach Hashem. Okay, and this is what the story is with Shaul. He was anointed, and it says it wasn't the oil from the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. It was a farsamon, which I think in English is called balsam or balsam, how you pronounce it. Very strong, fragrant oil, but not the oil that was preserved from the days of Moshe. Okay, which was actually eventually hidden away when the ark was hidden away much later on in Jewish history, but we'll come to all of that one day. So what happened? So he poured it on his head and he kissed him, right? And this was a sign of tremendous connection between the prophet, between Shmuel and Shaul. It's a beautiful scene. He said, surely this is the moment where you are anointed as a Nagid. Now, the word Nagid means a leader, but not the word Melech. So there's already hints to the fact that although Shaul is being anointed, we said last time, he was the exception. He wasn't from the tribe of Yehuda. And in the end of the day, we argued that he was the best man for the job at the time, but he's going to be a Nagid. He's not the real deal. He's not the 100% king. He's temporary. Shaul means to borrow. He's on borrowed time. Everything about Shaul is going to be very challenging, but he's anointed. Bet. Now here comes something interesting. Shaul is told by Shmuel, go and wend your way to a certain place, and on the way there'll be certain people that you will bump into, and you'll have a sign or a number of signs from these people which will, Mefarshim explain, which will justify or will explain to you that you're being chosen by God, and God is sending you signs to confirm the situation. It's very, very interesting. And all the rabbis are perplexed. Why does he need a sign? He's very conflicted, Shaul. He's a very modest guy. He's a very big honor. He's a very, his modesty is extreme. And in the position of leadership, not always easy to be the leader. as they say nowadays, to be the CEO, you've got to be prepared to fire people. Not easy thing, not easy job to do. And for Shaul, he's conflicted. I'm going to be the king, but on the other hand, I've got to do stuff which I'm not comfortable with. So he needs initially a little bit of what is called in Hebrew gibui, backup. So listen to this, Pasuk Bet. So Shmuel says to him, when you start going back, because he's got to report back to his father, you're going to be passing the grave of Rachel. How tragic it is today that it's like a fortress over there. Unbelievable. I remember this many years ago going to Cave Arocha, and it was easy, just walked in. But today it's a whole performance. But anyway, this is where he was going towards Cave Arocha. Begavul bin Yamin, but Tzeltzach, in a place called Tzeltzach. They say it was the border of Benjamin, but actually it was the border of Yehuda. It was on the edge of Yehuda, going towards Binyamin. And they will say to you, these people that you find, the whole thing with the donkeys. Remember, he was looking for the donkeys, and they've been found. And your father has really abandoned that whole search anyway. But he was worried about you, right? The Shaul's father, the man called Kish, he was worried. What can I do for my son? In other words, he thought his son is completely, you say in Yiddish, verblonge. He completely got lost. Gimel. V'chalafta misham v'hala. You will go on from there. And bata idelon Tabor. You come to the plain of Tabor. I don't think that's Mount Tabor, but it's getting a bit further towards the north. U'mitzaucha sham shlosha nashim. Then you'll find some more people, 3 merry men. Right? Remember Robin Hood? It's sort of a scene out of medieval England. The minstrels are playing on as they're walking along, and they're actually here. They're playing music because they're Nevi'im. And the Navi needed music to inspire to become a prophet. Okay, music is something which is recognized already in biblical days. Shaul needs a musician. David becomes the guy, playing the strings, and this is a very common thing. Even later on, Elisha, I think, also has music in order to prophesy. So Shaul is going to meet 3 men coming towards, going towards Bethel, which was always a holy place, and the place of where Yaakov dreamed the dream, etc. Echad nosei shlosha gedayim. One of them is carrying 3 kids, not children, but kids, meaning goats or whatever. He's got to be a pretty strong guy to carry 3 goats. I mean, with all due respect, but anyway. Echad nosei shlosha kikrot lechem. The easier job was to carry 3 loaves of bread. The second guy. Echad nosei navel yain, and one was just carrying the bottle of wine. He lucked out completely. He got the easy job. So there's 3 guys. And v'dalad, another sign, v'shalu lecha l'shalom, they will inquire after your welfare. They will say hello to you, which normally was not so straightforward, particularly when they were out of the city. Who knows, whether these are real people you can trust. Sometimes they were bandits. Who knows who they were? But they will inquire after you. And they will give you 2 of the loaves. Some say it wasn't the loaves, but it was cakes that they had. Whatever it is, they're going to share their food. So this is going to be yet another sign. And of course, giving a present to the king is what it's all about. When you go and visit royalty, you take them a present. As I mentioned before, Queen of England has more Chanukiot probably than any of us. The whole room put together here, 10 times over, 100 times over. She has a collection, because every time one member of the Jewish community goes to the Queen, they take a Chanukiah, and they're all silver, and she's got them all apparently on display. It's quite extraordinary. So you take something, you take a gift. So the concept of Shaul being given something is a sign of him receiving kingship, which I think is again really special. Now, Achar Kain Tavo Givat Elohim. At this point, you will turn towards the hill of God. That's where the ark was, which nowadays we colloquially call Telstone. Okay, but it doesn't say Telstone in the Bible. It's known as Kiryat Ye'arim, right? When you go up from the hill towards Yerushalayim, it's that whole thing on the left over there, when the sort of the road flattens out before it goes down towards Mavaseret, if you know where I am. And Asher Sham Netzivei in Pelishta. And the interesting thing, there's still Philistine officers stationed there. Right? In other words, they haven't shaken off the influence of the Plishtim. The Plishtim are right up, almost in Jerusalem. Right? Although remember, Yerushalayim hasn't yet been declared as they say now, they declared the capital. But in those days, it certainly, the Plishtim was still very much around. And one of the jobs that Shaul is going to have to deal with, one of the groups, is how to deal with the Plishtim, the famous story of Goliath, all to be revealed, Mitzvah Hashem, very soon. But when you come to this city, that the hill of God, you'll have a band of prophets, okay? Now you know what the collective for prophets is, a band of prophets. Yordim mehabama, they're coming down from some sort of high place, maybe an altar, whatever it is. Mifneim nevel v'tov v'chalil v'chino, and they'll be playing music. Again, in my mind, I picture this medieval scene of the minstrels playing their music as they're wandering through the countryside, Robin Hood and all that. V'heimo mitnabim, and they are prophesying. And we're not told what they are saying. We're not even told what the prophecy is, but there is obviously something going on. They are communing with God. All right, a bit like Braslav at Uman. If you're preparing to go there, you'll find a lot of people doing that sort of thing in the next couple of days. But at that point, and this is the clue, there is a transformation. I'm not sure what the word to use. There is tzolcha means literally hatzlacha. There will be a success upon you. Something very special will happen to you. A spirit of Hashem. How do I describe it? It's a moment of exhilaration, right? I don't know, when your first child is born and you're there and you see the baby for the first time. For some, it's the first time you went to the kotel. I've got to be honest, even though maybe I shouldn't admit this, but it doesn't do it for me so much, the kotel. All right, maybe going to see a certain rabbinic gentleman that I admire tremendously, that may be more significant in certain ways than certain landmarks. But for other people, it works. And, everyone has his own place to be inspired. So whatever it is, this spirit came upon Shaul, and he was transformed. He was elevated, right? I once saw Bavitcher Rebbe. I saw him when he was, I think, 89 years old. And there's no question about it. This man was amazing. He was so, not just energized. It was more than that. There was a charisma. There was a radiance around this guy. I couldn't describe it. And it was a regular mincha in 770. It was whatever it was, after night, of course. Chassidim. So they have their own timetable over there. But the reality is that it doesn't matter. The just being there and seeing his effect on the crowd and the Kriyat Yam Suf when he walked through the crowd and all the rest of it, unbelievable. And this is what we're talking about here. Ruach Hashem, there's some sort of spirit. When you're in a position of leadership, and particularly the Rebbe was so involved with the bigger picture of Klal Yisrael, he became like a different person. And the guy behind him is Shamas, who's the same age, 89 years old, was walking on a walker trying to keep up with him. It was really, I'm sorry I didn't have a camera with just to take a picture of it, because it was really something to see. But the Rebbe was really, really full of energy, full of charisma. This is what I call here Ruach Hashem. And then Shaul is going to join them. And all of a sudden, he starts doing prophecy, whatever that is. All right? Again, how do I even describe this? In the shir I gave 20 years ago, I started talking about Woodstock, right? And what was going on there, if anybody knows what, I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. It was the culture of the end of the 60s. I don't know. I'm really not sure. The farm of Woodstock was Yazga Farms. You probably know. Some of you may know the name. The farmer's nephew was a rabbi in my neighborhood, so it was really quite interesting. The Jews are everywhere. And this is the real change. You'll become like another person. And literally, with this spirit, with this incredible uplifting moment of connection to God, Shaul changed. And this, to me, is the whole essence of what happens later on when Shaul becomes depressed. It's not that he's going mad. Madness is not what's happening to Shaul. It's a depression because he's lost this spirit. And he sees David HaMelech. David, not yet David HaMelech, but David is obviously inheriting that spirit that Shaul had. And it's such a high and it's such a strong feeling of connection to God that Shaul just can't handle it. He can't handle that he had this, and through his own mistake, he lost it. And now David is taking over. And we'll see later on, around about chapter 17, how that all plays out. It's really very sad. Pasuk Zayin. Once you have all these signs, the gifts and the men and the elevation of spirit, right? You're personally going to feel like a different man. Then you go and do what you have to do. And Rashi points out that then you got to start preparing for kingship. You got to go to the tailor. You got to go to get your clothing sorted out. You've got to work out your plans of kingship. What sort of kingship are you going to? What is your kingdom going to be like? Is it going to be a kingdom of of generosity, or is it going to be a kingdom not so generous? All of this, says Rashi, is what Shaul is told. Once he's confirmed in his own mind that this is what he's going to become, then he goes ahead and plans to become a king, and he's got to get the right clothing. Even the fact that the robes and whatever he had to wear, the armor, the special armor, which again features later on, all of that is now being prepared. Posachet. And then you go to Gilgal. Gilgal was a very special place. It's one of the few places that we're not actually near. Modi'in is near, as we've already discovered, near most of the places that we're talking about here. Gilgal, you've got to go to the Jordan River, and it's somewhere between the Yarden. When they crossed the Yarden, the first place they got to was Gilgal. Whether it's, I'm sure it's marked on the map today, but I don't know what it's called. Probably has an Arab name, I'm assuming. But they went to Gilgal, and what do you do there? And Shmuel says, that's where I will come back and meet you, because this is a whole process. It's going to take a bit of time till he gets all of these signs and whatever. And then we'll do a sacrifice. We're going to offer peace offerings. Beautiful. The first commandment that I'm giving you as the king is to wait for 7 days. Doesn't seem to be so difficult until we get to the chapter where he's waiting and waiting, and Shmuel is late. Okay, Jewish meantime. It's always, everything's in the Bible. Shmuel, for whatever reason, comes a little bit late, and Shaul has a crisis, as we'll see later on. But he's told, wait till I arrive, and I'll tell you what we do next. Fine. This seems to be very doable. Pasuk Tet. Now, he turns to go away from Shmuel. At this turning is symbolic, because his heart becomes turned into something else. I can't describe this, but it's that moment of elevation, of inspiration. Again, all the words that you can put into this a particular description. Leiv acher, a different heart. I wouldn't say he was transplanted, but he was spiritually transplanted. And everything that was predicted took place on that day. It's beautiful. They get to this hill which they're meant to arrive at, where the ark is, because remember, the being near to the ark of Hashem it's like the generator, right? That's what generates the holiness, and of course that's where they start doing their prophecy. You sort of like nowadays, you get the signal, you got the modem, so you're connected. And he saw the band of prophets. Here they come. But it's a beautiful story. The Spirit rested upon Shaul, and he starts doing his nevuah. We're not told what it is. We're not told what they said. Who knows? They were communing with the Lord. Leave it at that. Now, people standing around who knew Shaul, remember, he's tall, so people recognized him. And all of a sudden, they see him. He's in a trance. Maybe he's fallen down on the ground, and he's mumbling. Who knows what he's doing? And people are looking. They see he's with a whole bunch of prophets. And again, the rabbis say that there were many prophets. I think they said there was over 1 million prophets at one time in Israel, most of whom we have no clue who they were. Right? So Nevi'ut, prophecy, was very common. And Shaul is amongst this particular group. And everyone spoke to each other, and they started talking about Shaul. What's happened to this son of Kish? What's happened to this guy? Is he amongst the prophets? In other words, it's unexpected. And the rabbis in brackets over here, the written text puts a little comment in. So in this conversation, the Reuven says to Shimon, what's happened to Shaul? And Shimon says, well, look at the other guys. Is prophecy from their father? Do you inherit prophecy? No. You become a prophet because you work hard. You become more spiritual, become less physical, whatever it may be. And therefore, Kain Haita Lamashal Agam Shel B'Neviim, Shaul was one of those guys that obviously became imbued with prophecy, and it became a byword amongst the Jewish people of Agam Shaul B'Neviim. I'm wondering in modern Hebrew if the expression exists. It's Agam Shaul B'Neviim. Yeah, what are you doing here? What, are you part of this, right? How would you say it in English? Who made you what you are? Yeah, it's so more such better expression when you have it in Hebrew. Yeah. I mean, you have to admit that. In English, you've got to start fumbling around with all the all the scripture. Hagam Shaul B'Neviim. Okay, these beautiful expressions, which today, I just used an expression we just bought a bed. So the guy who sold us the bed said it's going to be delivered in a week or two. This was a couple of weeks ago. So I said to him, is it going to be delivered ben keser la'asor? And I was pushing my luck, but I knew he knew what it meant because he's a learned guy selling beds. Fine. He said, lo. He said, Lifnei Rosh Hashanah. Ben keser la'asor, b'ti Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Now, those of us saying slichot, we know that expression. But I think Machla said that, you know what I was talking about, right? You commented. So again, there are certain expressions which have just crept in to the language, and Gam Shel B'Neviim is again one of those expressions. Beautiful. So what happened? Pasuk Yud Gimel. It's a great story. So for whatever the prophecy session ended, and they got to this raised place. Dod Shaul. Now, interesting. The word Dod is obviously written like the word David. So maybe a remnant that already Shaul. You should know that eventually this. Dod, which may be a remez to somebody else, as we know, David, he's in the wings. But at the moment, the uncle of Shaul, the brother of Kish. I always thought this was referring to Avner, but I did a bit more research, and most people say Avner was Shaul's cousin. Kish had a brother called Ner, and Ner had a son called Avner ben Ner. Right? So Ner was brother number one, Kish was brother number two. Kish had a son called Shaul. Ner had a son called Avner. Avner was a really phenomenal guy, as we're going to learn about later on. And these two gentlemen, Avner and Shaul, got worked together in terms of the army. Avner was the head of the army. He was also a great scholar. Lots of interesting things to come about Avner. But at this point, it's the uncle of Shaul, so it must have been Ner. Or maybe there was another brother, we don't even know his name. But look what the uncle says. Elav el na'aro onalachtim. He said to Shaul and to the lad, where have you gone? Where have you come from? What have you been doing? You sent us to go and find the animals. We were running around, trying to find these donkeys. But and we never found them. El Shmuel, we ended up meeting up with Shmuel. So this uncle had a premonition. You don't just meet the prophet by the by. He had a message for you. And this again is unbelievable. Shaul has just been told he's going to be the new king of Israel, right? He's been told that he has basically won the lottery. Now again, if we are so lucky to win the lottery, I suspect we may not go and announce it, maybe on social media, hopefully not, because you'll start getting these weird and wonderful messages. But put it more bluntly, you'd certainly tell your family, you'd certainly let people know, right? And, what you'd give to stockers and all the rest of it if we were so lucky. At this point, Shaul says to his uncle something incredible, Tet Zayin. Shmuel told us everything's fine, the animals were found. But he didn't mention anything about becoming the king. He didn't say a word. Remember, the modesty of Shaul is breathtaking. Asher Omar Shmuel, what Shmuel had said. In other words, he didn't tell his uncle, oh, by the way, Uncle Ner, I've just become the king of Israel. It's sort of thing he might have mentioned in passing. It's not, as I said, not something to publicize to the whole world, but at least tell your uncle. Maybe you can argue he wanted to wait to tell his father, therefore he didn't tell his uncle. But the rabbis say this is all a part of the modesty of Shaul. But there's a time and a place for modesty. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Anav Mikol Adam, but when he had to raise his stick and when he had to shout at the people, he shouted. and he had to, sort of make the rules. Shaul is very conflicted about this, and he has a hard time with this. Pasuk Yud Zayin, v'yatzek Shmuel et ha'am el Hashem hamitzpah. At this point, Shmuel, who is a very wonderful character in so many ways, and he's also a great politician. He understands that if he tells the Jewish people, you've got a new king, even though they ask for a king, they want to have a hand in choosing the king, or at least to see that the choice has been done in a fair manner, right? Being in charge of Jews has never been an easy job, as Mr. Netanyahu will tell you. Yudchet, Vayomer b'nei Yisrael. So what happened? Shmuel says to the Jewish people, Kol Hashem l'keisar, I'm giving you a message from God. Again, the history lesson always comes out. I took you out of Egypt, and I saved you from them, and all the different people that attacked you, the Ammonites, the Moabites, all the rest of them, Og, and all the others. I saved everybody. And he's still bringing that point out, that in asking for a king, the way they asked it, we spoke about this before, was in fact a rejection of God in the way that they requested it, and it should have been done differently. But God listened. He wanted the king to save you from all the troubles. And you said to him that you want a king. You've got representation of the whole people coming to the Givah, coming to this hill. So again, next time you drive to Jerusalem, you look on the left, or when you're coming back, you look on the right towards Modi'in, and at that plain that you have over there with the beautiful yeshiva buildings in the background there, Telstone, just again think what was going on there approximately 2,500 years ago. It was an open plain, and they were crowning and they were anointing the king of Israel, and it's phenomenal. Just every time you do a journey here, you're literally going back in history. You're reliving that moment, at least in your mind's eye. It's really something special. Listen to this, Pasuk Cha. V'yakrev Shmuel at kol shivtei Yisrael. So he brought all the tribes together. V'yilached Shevet Binyamin, and particularly the tribe Binyamin. The problem with the tribe Binyamin is back to the Pelegesh B'Givah. They'd been literally almost wiped out. So now that the king was going to be from the tribe of Binyamin, it needed a kind of extra stempel, extra approval. So what was the extra approval? Pasuk Kavalim. Vayakrev et Shevet Binyamin. So they brought the tribe of Binyamin forward. Lemishpachotah, right? And Rashi explains what's going on here. There's a kind of goral, what is called the word in modern Hebrew, which is taken from the original words which are used about this, is the word kalpi. Kalpi today is when you go to vote, you go to the kalpi, to the booth, the polling station. And here there's a kalpi going on. There's a kind of voting situation. They had a hat full of all the different names and tribes, and they're pulling out names as they go along. And the tribe of Binyamin comes up as being the tribe to be chosen, and the Mishpachotav according to the families. And then you've got to have another hat full of all the different names of the families of Benjamin. But Tilochei Mishpachat Matri, and then it gets to the family of what is known as Matri. Tilochei Shaul ben Kish, and then out of that family comes the name of Shaul. So all of this is it's like bingo, right? 88. And all the other numbers that you can think of. They're looking for Shaul, and he's not to be found. Where is he? What's happened to Shaul? So Shaul was with the program till the moment when they were going to announce to the whole of the Jewish people, he's the chosen one. And he's not to be found. Where is he? And this is, again, so interesting. Posuk Chafbet. Vayishalu od bashem haba od halom. Basically, they did what we call the Urim V'Tumim. They said, God knows where he is, or God knows where he is, how do you pronounce that? And we're trying to find him. So where is he? And Hashem responded, Vayomer Hashem, right? You're not going to have to look very far. Hinehu nechba el hakelim. Another expression, I think, which has crept into modern Hebrew. When something is hidden, nechba el hakelim, it's hidden amongst the luggage. Basically, what Shaul decided to do, he couldn't face this public coronation or whatever it was, and he just dived into whatever pile of bags or whatever he saw there, and he tried to hide. Unbelievable. Again, the modesty just overtook him. He couldn't handle it. So everybody ran to bring him back. And they lifted him out, and the scene is incredible. As I said, driving past there, you've got to picture this scene. And he's standing now amongst all of the nation looking on. And of course, you can't miss him because he's head and shoulders above everybody else. He's tall. Shmuel shows the people that it's not just their choice. God has given them a hechsher. God has given them a stamp of approval that the choice of Shaul is absolutely 100% confirmed. Beautiful. Ki ein kamo b'chol ha'am. There's nobody like him. V'yoreu kol ha'am v'yomrichi hamelech. And everybody screamed out, "Long live the king!" But this is Jews. And Jews, by definition, there's always going to be the left wing, there's always going to be the right wing, as we know till this very day. I'm not calling these the wings here left and right, but there's going to be a group. We're not so sure. Who is he? What is he? All of a sudden, all the naysayers raise their ugly heads. Listen to this. Kaf he. So Shmuel reminds everybody, you're choosing a king. He can take your men to the army. He can take your women into the palace to become cooks and bottle washers and whatever. And it's all written down. Signed. The contract was made. Everybody was sent home. However, Shaul got the impression maybe that it wasn't 100% consensus. He goes back to where he came from. And he has already an entourage with him. However, there's always a group that doesn't want to agree. They just don't want to sign on the dotted line. I don't even want to get political. I'm not even going to go there. But I think you know what I'm thinking. But they turn around and say, what? So he's tall and he's strong and he comes from a good line of good yichus or whatever. But is he really going to do the job, the business? And they despised it. They mocked him. They made a mockery. And they certainly did not present him with any sign of a gift as one would to a king. And he remained silent. And the rabbis say that was in fact a critique. He should have said something. He should have stood up and said, "You guys who are going against me, you should know you're wrong." Said at least, establish his authority. And he didn't. It's like the teacher on the first day of class, and you've got a rowdy class. If you don't establish your authority on day one, you're basically dead for the rest of the year. It doesn't quite work like that, but every teacher is told this. On first day, you got to let them know what's what. I'm going to literally race through chapter 11 because I wanted to start chapter 12 on the next session, which will be Bezrat Hashem after the Chagim. I don't think we can do anything till after the Chagim, but we'll send out a note somewhere towards the end of October. But listen to this, because this story is fabulous. Yudala. So there's an immediate and present danger. A guy called Nachash. You can imagine a name like Nachash is not the most friendly guy to have dealings with. He's an Ammonite, the king, and he's a snake, literally. And he started with Yavesh Gilad, which is the other side of the Jordan, the 2.5 tribes. El Nachash, and they said to Nachash, Karat lanu brid v'navdecha, we'll serve you. They were prepared to give in. They're prepared to, as they say today, to lose the war. But Yomer Alehem Nachash Amoni, he was going to have his pound of flesh. He wasn't satisfied just with a surrender. He said, Kol ein yamin bezot echrot lechem binekon lechem kol ein yamin. I'm going to agree to it, provided you're prepared to blind yourself in the right eye. Everybody of that particular tribe, disgusting human being. But unfortunately, we're dealing with them still to this very day. But Samtia Cherpa al Kol Yisrael, and he wanted to bring it as a Cherpa. Defeat produces Cherpa. Cherpa, as he translates here, is a reproach against the Jewish people. Wow. So the people of Yavesh were very frightened. They asked for a 7-day pause to make up their mind. They're not going to agree to this. How can they agree to it? And they sent messengers throughout Israel. Noah to come and fight. If nobody helps us, we're going to have to give in. They obviously saw they couldn't win the war by themselves. So they come to the hill of Shaul. They tell the people what's happened, and everybody starts crying. It was a tragedy. They're all gonna be blinded. Most terrible price they would have to pay. Shaul. Now Shaul all of a sudden hears this, and he rises to his full height. And imagine the effect that this had on the people. It galvanized the people. Now he's gone back to looking after the animals because he's still not convinced that everybody wants him to be the king. And why is everybody crying, for goodness sake? And they told him the whole story, what was going on with the Ammonites threatening the men of Yavesh. But and again, the spirit comes down from God. When he hears what's going on, and he became very incensed, because rightly so, right? As we are so incensed at the situation at the moment, focusing hopefully on the bad guys, and hopefully by the time we meet next time, we'll have something to celebrate. I hope so. And what did he do? So interesting. He needs to bring the Jewish people together. And he's from the tribe of Shaul. Remember the story of Pelegesh Givah? One of the terrible events at the end was the cutting of the animal into the woman, essentially, not the animal, excuse me. It was the woman into 12 parts. Not something you talk about in polite company, but unfortunately that's what happened. And now Shaul is cutting the animal into 12 parts. And he sends each part to a different tribe. If you don't follow us, your animals will all be cut into pieces. It was a big threat because the economy relied on the animals. And the fear of God came upon them. Unbelievable story. And they all galvanized, they came together. Unity of the Jewish people. It's always been our strength, and it still is. I'm not going to go into that, but there was a counting, which is a whole parsha by itself, how they were counted. 300,000 soldiers of the regular Jews. The Ish Yudah, Shloshim Elef, and the men of Yehuda, always you would say nowadays the elite, the Givati, or whatever the elite group is today. I hear all these names, but I'm not really sure who's the top of the tree there. But the 8,200. Am I right? Is that's an elite group? I know. Sayeret and Matkal and all the names and all the abbreviations, which when I was in the army, I never knew what half of the things were. Anyway, Pasuk Tet. So they said to the messengers, tell the men of Yavesh Gilad, tomorrow there's going to be a tremendous salvation. Everybody was overjoyed because they realized this is what they wanted a king for. And it's a short chapter, we'll just finish. Tomorrow they're going to come out. And do whatever what is good in your eyes. In other words, basically, we'll see, you'll come to help us, and hopefully we will win. And Shaul made a plan of the army in three groups. And he came through the camp. They came amongst the camp. And the Ammonites were so unprepared, they just demolished them. Just think of all those buildings that are being demolished at the moment. Unbelievable. The films of all that stuff is truly amazing. Anyone was left, they ran away. Not even two of the enemy could stand together. And I'm learning this, and I'm saying, halavai, this should be our reward for everything that we've gone through, that the enemy eventually won't even have two of them being able to stand together. We learn this, we need to be inspired, we need to be encouraged by this. Because it happened once, God is on our side, please God, it will happen again. Two of them should not even be able to stand together to fight us. Wow. And the people said, in other words, if there were people who were doubting Shaul, they wanted to kill the people, they wanted to take Jews and make an example of that. And Shaul says, no. Shaul, this is a king. Lo yumat ish bayom. Nobody's going to die of the Jewish people. Ki hayom asa Hashem teshua b'Yisrael. God made a salvation. It's not a day for killing our people. It's a day for celebrating those people who doubted me, those people who went against that. They will end up with what they will end up with. But today is not a day for recrimination. Vayomer Shmuel el ha'am l'chov v'nelcha Gilgal. They wanted to go back to Gilgal and Chadesh Hamlucha and repeat the coronation again in Gilgal, which was the most significant place where they came into Eretz Yisrael, and that was going to be the sign of absolute kingship. Vayelchu kol ha'am Gilgala vayamlichu sham et Shaul lifnei Hashem b'Gilgal. They all crowned Shaul, even the people who disagreed became together. Vayizgu sham zvachim sham Hashem. They made these sacrifices. Vayismach sham Shaul. This was the party of all parties. Vayismach sham Shaul chanshe Yisrael ad ma'od, and they were ecstatic. And I just want to end with this thought that here we're reading about the coronation of a human king. And back to the Rosh Hashanah theme. Rosh Hashanah, there's a big question, right? That we're supposed to be, it's a very fearful day. And we're standing in court. And all of a sudden, what are we commanded to do? We're supposed to have meals, and we're commanded to wear the nice clothes and sing during the davening. Everything is as if, we're trying to brush off the event. But the answer is that look at what happened here when they anointed the first king. They won their battle. They went and they rejoiced. Even though it was a time when they were anointing a king, there is this element of simcha. There is a sense of joy that there's order in our lives, that there's a king, and that there's an army, and that there's something that's happening in order to protect us. And as I said, maybe, please God, this becomes a segula for us in the current situation, that will rejoice again. V'yismach sham Shaul v'chol anshe Yisrael. The whole of the Jewish people, ad ma'od, not just ma'od, ad ma'od, extra joy. It'll be, instead of the Simchat Torah that we went through 2 years ago, maybe this Simchat Torah will be super duper joy, happiness for all of us. And Bezrat Hashem should be the end of the bad times, and Tichle Shana Kilotea, end the year, the curses of the year, and Tochel Shana Ubirchotea, and the blessings will begin. And wish everybody Ketiva V'Chatima Tova. Tada. Thank you.